It is the summer of 1940, and somewhere on the outskirts of Burbank, California, the sun beats down on what appears to be a perfectly ordinary suburban street. Modest wooden houses sit in tidy rows. Laundry hangs from washing lines. Pavements thread between patches of lawn. From above, from, say, the cockpit of a hostile aircraft, it looks utterly unremarkable, a neighborhood like 10,000 others scattered across the American West, except that it does not exist. Beneath that canvas and chicken wire and painted timber, beneath the fake chimneys and the hollow trees and the cloth hedgerows pinned to a vast wooden framework, lies one of the most consequential aircraft factories in the history of the Second World War. The Lockheed Vega plant, a facility that would help manufacture thousands of aircraft for the Allied war effort, sits hidden in plain sight, swallowed up inside an elaborate theatrical illusion large enough to cover nearly 26 hectares. The entire neighborhood, every house, every fence, every prop cow grazing on a painted field, had been constructed on a framework suspended above the factory roof by teams of set designers and carpenters recruited from the Hollywood studios less than 15 kilometers away. When enemy reconnaissance aircraft flew overhead, and the threat was considered entirely real in those anxious months following Pearl Harbor, they would photograph what appeared to be a placid residential district, catalogue it as civilian infrastructure, and move on. The factory would keep running. This is the story of how Hollywood and the American military-industrial complex conspired to hide an entire manufacturing operation beneath a fake world, and why that decision, extraordinary, audacious, almost theatrical in its ambition, reflects something profound about how nations wage industrial war. To understand why such an outrageous measure was deemed necessary, one must understand the psychological climate gripping the American West Coast in late 1941 and early 1942. The attack on Pearl Harbor on the 7th of December 1941 had demonstrated with devastating clarity that the Pacific was no barrier at all. In a matter of hours, Japanese carrier aircraft had crossed open ocean and reduced a considerable portion of the United States Pacific Fleet to burning wreckage. If aircraft could strike Pearl Harbor, the logic went, they could reach California. That logic was not entirely irrational. Japanese submarines were already operating in coastal waters. On the 23rd of February 1942, a Japanese submarine surfaced near Santa Barbara and shelled an oil facility at Elwood, the first foreign attack on the American mainland since the War of 1812. 2 days later, anti-aircraft batteries across Los Angeles opened fire on what many believed were hostile aircraft. Whether anything was actually there remains disputed to this day. The incident, known as the Battle of Los Angeles, ended without a confirmed enemy contact, but the panic it produced was genuine and total. In this atmosphere, the concentration of aircraft manufacturing facilities along the Southern California coastline was understood to be a catastrophic vulnerability. Lockheed Aircraft Corporation in Burbank, Douglas Aircraft in Long Beach and Santa Monica, North American Aviation in Inglewood. These plants were not peripheral to the Allied war effort. They were its beating industrial heart. In 1942 alone, the Lockheed and its subsidiary Vega plants would produce roughly 2,600 aircraft. By the war's end, the combined California aviation industry would account for roughly a third of all American military aircraft production. A single successful bombing raid on any of these facilities could set back production by months, perhaps years. The facilities could not be moved. They could not be buried underground. They could not be adequately protected by anti-aircraft emplacements alone against a determined, coordinated strike. They could, however, be hidden. The man tasked with solving this problem was a set designer named John Stuart Detley. He was not a military strategist. He was not a structural engineer. He was the art director at Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. And he had spent his career building worlds that did not exist. Alien planets, mythological kingdoms, perfect replicas of foreign cities, constructed on studio backlots in Culver City. The Army Corps of Engineers approached him with a brief that would have seemed perfectly ordinary by Hollywood standards. Build a neighborhood. Make it convincing. Make it large enough to cover 26 hectares. Do it quickly. Detley assembled a team drawn almost entirely from the film industry. Scenic painters, carpenters, prop masters, riggers. They understood, better than any military contractor, the grammar of visual deception. How light behaves, how shadow reads from altitude, how the eye fills in detail that is not really there. The approach they settled upon was essentially theatrical in conception, but engineering in its execution. Over the factory's roof, they erected a vast framework of timber and wire, a kind of enormous stage set, elevated just enough above the factory surface to allow for ventilation and access. Onto this framework they laid a surface of burlap netting, painted in muted greens and buffs and greys to suggest the irregular texture of lawns, pavements, and rooftops from above. The houses themselves were remarkable objects. Each was a hollow shell, constructed from lightweight timber and canvas, designed to weigh almost nothing while presenting a convincing silhouette to aerial photography. They had false chimneys made from painted rubber. They had windows that were not windows, doors that opened onto nothing. Painted shadows were applied directly to their surfaces to suggest depth and dimension under specific lighting conditions. The scale of the deception was extraordinary. Estimates suggest that somewhere between 400 and 500 individual structures were constructed across the site, including not just houses, but a network of replica streets complete with curb markings, a neighborhood of fake trees fashioned from wire and painted cloth, artificial shrubs installed in rows along the fake garden paths, lorries and cars, real ones, old and decommissioned, were parked at intervals along the fake streets to suggest daily civilian life. A petrol station was included. So were several small commercial premises, because a residential neighborhood without a corner shop looked suspicious even from 30,000 feet. The entire structure rested on a framework strong enough to support maintenance workers, who would regularly walk the surface adjusting elements, repainting deteriorating sections, ensuring that nothing looked too new or too uniform. The goal was entropy, the convincing randomness of a neighborhood that had developed organically over time. The Lockheed Vega plant beneath this elaborate disguise continued producing aircraft throughout the war. Among its most significant contributions was the Lockheed Ventura, a twin-engine patrol bomber used extensively by both American and British Commonwealth forces, and later the Lockheed Hudson, which had already earned a distinguished record in British service. The plant also contributed to production of the P-38 Lightning, one of the most effective American fighter aircraft of the entire conflict. A twin-boomed, twin-engined machine capable of speeds exceeding 660 kilometers per hour that would eventually become the highest-scoring American fighter in the Pacific Theater. If you are finding this interesting, a quick subscribe helps more than you know. Workers inside the plant reportedly experienced the strange psychological effect of knowing the world above their heads was false. Shifts would end, and employees would emerge through carefully concealed access points into a neighborhood of empty shells, walking briefly through a ghost town before descending back into the real world below. By several accounts, the effect was deeply disorienting. a daily reminder that the line between the real and the constructed was, in wartime, entirely negotiable. No Japanese aircraft ever bombed Burbank, whether this was due to the camouflage, to the effective deterrence of American fighter patrols, or simply to the fact that Japanese carrier aviation never developed sufficient range for sustained operations against the mainland, cannot be stated with certainty. The records do not allow a definitive verdict on whether the disguise was ever tested in earnest. The Americans were not alone in pursuing industrial camouflage on this scale, and a comparison with German and British approaches reveals important differences in philosophy and execution. The Germans had their own camouflage program, centered particularly on protecting the Ruhr industrial complex and key synthetic oil facilities. Their approach tended toward the technical: smokescreens, anti-aircraft concentrations, dispersal of manufacturing to smaller satellite facilities. The Albert Speer organization oversaw some genuine deception work. Dummy airfields were constructed to attract Allied bombs away from real ones, and certain facilities were given misleading external appearances. But the scale of what Detley and his Hollywood colleagues achieved at Burbank had no German equivalent. The British, who had been living under the Luftwaffe since the summer of 1940, had developed their own camouflage directorate under the War Office. Colonel John Turner's department was responsible for an ambitious program of industrial disguise that included painting factory rooftops to blend with surrounding terrain and constructing elaborate decoy sites designed to attract night bombers away from cities. These decoy sites, known as starfish, used controlled fires and pyrotechnic arrangements to simulate the burning urban targets the German Pathfinder aircraft were seeking. Between 1940 and 1944, it is estimated that starfish sites attracted roughly 730 tons of German ordnance that would otherwise have fallen on genuine targets. What distinguished the Burbank project from these British and German precedents was its ambition and its irreverence. No British or German program attempted to construct an entirely false civilian neighbourhood above an active manufacturing facility. The Hollywood approach introduced something the military mind rarely produces: genuine imagination. Assessing the actual historical impact of the Burbank camouflage requires a certain honesty about what can and cannot be known. The project was undoubtedly a genuine military undertaking, funded and authorized at the highest levels, and operated for a significant period. The scale of the investment, hundreds of structures, ongoing maintenance, a workforce dedicated to upkeep, suggests that those in authority took the threat seriously and considered the concealment worthwhile. Whether it ever actually deceived anyone is a different question. Japanese strategic bombing operations against the American mainland remained extremely limited throughout the war. The Japanese Navy possessed the carrier aircraft to theoretically reach California in 1941 and early 1942. But the operational and logistical demands of fighting across the Pacific largely precluded sustained operations against the West Coast. After the Battle of Midway in June 1942, which destroyed 4 Japanese fleet carriers and the bulk of their experienced aviator corps, the threat diminished substantially. The Burbank camouflage program was wound down towards the end of the war, the structures dismantled, and the factory roof returned to its ordinary industrial appearance. Photographs survive, taken from ground level and from above, and they remain genuinely startling. The sight of a perfect suburb hovering above an aircraft factory strikes the modern eye as something between civic engineering and surrealist art. Several of the original photographs are held in public archives, and occasional exhibitions have displayed the documentation. The factory itself, now part of the Lockheed Martin complex, continues to operate, though in radically different form. No permanent memorial or interpretive display exists on the site. Return, then, to that summer morning above Burbank. An aerial observer scanning the landscape below for industrial targets, looking for the clean geometrical outlines of factory rooftops, the regular spacing of skylights, the telltale shadows of loading bays and assembly halls. What they see instead is a neighbourhood at rest. Families, perhaps, behind those curtained windows. Children on those quiet streets. Washing on those lines. Nothing of military value. Move on. Beneath that gaze, undetected, unharmed, the factory hums. Men and women on the production floor assemble wings and fuselages and engine nacelles. Rivet guns sound in rhythmic bursts. Overhead cranes swing components across the workshop floor. P-38 fighters take shape in their dozens. Aircraft that will reach the Pacific, that will engage Japanese formations over New Guinea and the Philippines and the waters around Okinawa, are being born in this space that officially does not exist. The deception required no secret weapon, no technical breakthrough, no scientific advance. It required only the understanding that reality is, to some considerable degree, a matter of what you can be made to believe. John Detley and his Hollywood carpenters had spent their professional lives constructing worlds that audiences would accept as real for the duration of a film. The military asked them to construct a world convincing enough for an enemy pilot to accept as real for the duration of the war. They applied exactly the same principles. The canvas was larger, the stakes somewhat higher, but the craft was identical. The great irony of the Burbank camouflage operation is that it was not a military achievement at all, not really. It was a feat of production design, the most consequential set ever built in the history of Southern California cinema, assembled not on a studio backlot, but above one of the most productive aircraft factories in the world, erected by people who understood instinctively that the difference between a real house and a fake house, from sufficient altitude, is simply a matter of commitment to the illusion. The bombers never came. The factory never stopped. Hollywood had, quite literally, won.